And they start with a wash. For me, at least, there are painters that don't use a wash, and they paint directly onto white. But for me, it's always a wash. You can have your setup this close to your canvas. I mean, a lot of people do that when they're doing portraits. So they have the person sitting there, and then they actually just measure off the top of the head, measure off the chin and things like that. But this would have been better if it was further back. But then it might throw it out of focus for you. So I've brought it up onto the same plane for the camera so that everything is focused on the one. And now we're going to tamp that down a little. And we're going to measure and find the width, half the width of its height, which is handy because that's the dimensions of this, or the ratio of this canvas. Half. So we can say we want the vase to be there and the flowers at the top to be there. Let's give it a bit of air above it. It'd be nice. Okay. And what's half that? Okay, so say half that is there. It's about there. Let's give ourselves a halfway line. Give ourselves a center line. Okay. All right. And crooking my arm again. Let's see how high the vase is compared to the flowers. They look not too dissimilar to me. So put the tip of the brush on the top of the vase. Like that. You can just about see my finger there. Okay, and then move it up. It's actually another sort of another bit on top. So it's less than half. I think that the vase actually comes up to there. Okay. So the spray of flowers is quite big in comparison to the vase. Okay. I expect that the one that Monet painted was considerably larger than this again. Okay, so there. Let's put a side on it there. The horizon. I'm going to have it coming up a bit more because this is a much more sort of uncontrolled painting, or how would you say it, sort of less formal painting than the other ones that I've done this week. So it doesn't need to be sort of a perfectly accurate portrayal. We decided it would come up there, didn't we? Comes off there and there like that. Flower heads there. Flower heads coming off the center line. Flower head there. Flower head there. Flower head there. It's like drawing a constellation, isn't it? A constellation of flowers. You see sort of patterns in it. Orion's belt, the plough. That's from the edge a bit more. Okay, that seems to be little one there, that coming out to the edge a bit more. Obviously, these are carnations. I had to get whatever Lidl had in their shop. And it looked to me like Monet was consciously sort of not respecting overly particular accuracy of what was in front of him. So I'm going to try not to. I would be, as I was saying earlier in the week, I'd be more akin, I'd have more sort of association with what Manet, the way Manet painted, than I would for Monet. So this is a kind of experimentation for me. And I do heartily recommend experimentation. and just looking to see what the ways people painted. It's quite liberating, actually. Okay, so we've got all that. All of this here is spindly sort of stuff, which is not too, comes in through there. It's a dark there. Okay, all right. So that's our that'll be our drawing. There's the usual colors. There's the burnt umber, the cobalt blue, the permanent rose, the cadmium yellow, pale hue, and the titanium white. No black. There's going to be no black in this painting, and I took it off the palette. I don't think Monet used black. I think he's one of the ones that principally didn't use black. So I took it off the palette for this experiment. Now I'm going to start with those flower heads, okay? Because I think they're the kind of the most vivid, bright things in this painting. They're quite dark, so lots of permanent rose. Putting in a little bit of yellow, just a little though, because I think mostly they're much darker than that. I can't make the shadow version. See the shadows here, for example, you know, on that flower, and the one behind in here and here. I can't put black into those to make them dark. Manet, I think, would have put black into them. Monet didn't use black, so I'm putting blue into that. It's kind of the opposite color on the on this particular color wheel, and you do get a dark. So I'm going to put that in there where I see it there, and consequently everywhere else that I see it too. There, in there. So that one was a bit dark, didn't I? This one here, dark. Yeah, Monet painted with such freedom. Okay, let's put in some of the brighter parts. Let's put in some of the foliage, kind of get it out of the way. So yellow, blue, that makes a green. A little bit of red into it to make it more natural. And once again, I'm going to have to make the dark parts of it out of whatever I have. So I have to put more blue to it. I can't do otherwise because there's no black. Dark parts of the foliage. So coming in through the glass there. I'm using this is a filbert brush. All right, so it's flat, but it's also kind of round as well. It's not like a chisel. Here we go. We're not too worried about the sort of, not too worried about the exact sort of how would you sort of diameter of these little sort of tubes that we're painting here. That one coming off there like that, because we can cut that back with the background. Dark down there. Okay, and now we'll do some of the lighter greens here. And we're just sort of we're only building this up now. This is the kind of this averaging out of the whole thing that we're doing, the whole painting. And it's just an impression. It's an impression that there's sort of these little sort of fronds and stalks, roughly in the position we want them. There's a kind of a a greener, or so I should say paler version of that green as well. Okay. As I say, there's a kind of a freedom in the way Monet painted. It's kind of not like the way I paint. I think he's very fast. And if you consider that he must have been sitting outside painting water lilies or in the sunshine, or painting Chartres Cathedral or something like that. He must have been out there all day. All right, so that's I think that's our kind of structure. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is paint the background, or at least start the background. Okay, so I'm going to make a reasonably dilute mix of that blue, that kind of violet-y blue. I'll just show you. Okay, so I'm going to grab a load of white, a load of blue, a load of blue, yeah, a little bit of red into it. Because it is kind of a violet, got a bit more blue. You do these things incrementally. You don't sort of just whack loads of stuff. You can't know exactly what you're going to mix. And a bit of oil, help the paint move. Anyway, so something like that. All right, so we're going to put that in. Okay. Oh yeah, that's a bit better. I always find it's a bit of a it's a question of judgment as to how much of the stalks you paint, you know, compared to the background. And I always kind of sort of do sort of half of one and six of a dozen of the other, if you know what I mean. I don't do all the stalks and I don't do all the background, and then eventually later on in the painting I'll marry them together. It's just so that I don't end up creating mud, because this is very different from the green. And Monet used a lot of paint. Wasn't it about that time that paint started being available in tubes for the first time, so they didn't actually go and have to mix their own paints, which is one of the reasons I think why the old masters sort of paintings took so long, apart from the fact they were so meticulous. But they had to grind all their own pigments and mix them. If you've seen The Girl with the Pearl Earring film with Scarlett Johansson, it's a good film actually. And, it's a nice little sort of vignette of an artist's life in those days. Once this sort of layer goes on, it starts getting easier to apply the paint. And it's a bit like acrylics in that regard. That's always been my thing with acrylics. It takes a while to get into an acrylics painting because the surface is so, it feels almost like kind of it's dragging. It's like sandpaper at the beginning, and then you start working into the paint that you put down. It feels a lot better. It gets nicer as you. It's more pleasurable. Foreground. Dark. That's a piece of marble, black marble, from a fondue set that we ruined. That's where you sort of put your bacon and what are they called? Sort of gratin potatoes or whatever they are. So right, so here we go. So that's dark. It's kind of reddish dark. So let's go back and let's mix that in front of you, because I think it's going to be based on blue. In Monet's painting, he's obviously sat this all on a sideboard. It's kind of dark brown, but I don't have a sideboard. Neither does half the country anymore. So look, let me put a little bit of oil. Okay, it's nice oil. Well, linseed oil is the same as long as it's refined. So blue, cobalt blue, permanent rose, and yellow, and more permanent rose. Now we're starting to get a kind of dark that we want. Parts of it are yellowish, parts of it are bluish. All right, so we'll just put that in first. We're putting in our darks first. Okay, so yes, you can see that I've tilted the foreground. Dark there. This is just like a great big dark. Goes into here, goes around there. I'm just leaving my drawing so that I can remember where I am. As I said, it kind of goes greenish over here. Now, the paint's still reasonably sort of thin at this stage. This is a lean paint. You've heard it in oils I'm painting, I'm sure, fat over lean. So this is the lean part. So I'm not putting great textured lumps of paint down. It's reasonably thin actually. Well, it's not that thin, but it's thinly applied. It's not textural yet. Okay. Now I'm just going to sort of bring in some of that background into here. Still going to leave my drawing because I want to make sure that I don't go awry. There's a lovely greenish tinge as it comes down around here. Not sure where it's coming from. That's the meniscus. I've been using that word for years, like in the class, and when I'm explaining where the water line is, the meniscus of the water. And then yesterday I lost confidence. I had to look it up to make sure I was actually given the right word. And then there's this style of painting is actually very forgiving. It's more forgiving than normal, because you know that you're always going to be able to work into it later of quite heavy paint. So I'm going to put in the darker parts of the glass where I see the dark as it comes around, and so it is there too. All right, a bit more of that green there. The dark comes up around there, which we've got, so put that in there. We're starting now not to need our drawing anymore. Rim of the glass. Okay. Now, how are we doing on the stalks? Well, let's put in some information in those stalks. Some darks, maybe. A few more darks. So we can start sort of getting a bit of structure on this. And it wasn't Monet who said, and it's very encouraging, he said, every time I start a painting, I'm not sure I can do it anymore. Which made me feel a lot better. I forget a little flower head there. noticing things that I didn't notice at the drawing stage, little bits of fronds and things that I hadn't noticed the first time around. It's interesting there. It's coming across there like that. Bit of a broken frond, really. And there's some very sort of bluish greens, greeny greens and yellowy greens throughout this painting, this composition. But you're putting them in as dabs. You're not sort of you're not going to, excuse me, go up and start sort of getting the flower head right. It's all done through building up of dabs, like a jigsaw or a mosaic. Some here, okay. A few more dark bluish ones. Put them in there to. Okay, gonna cut in with the background again. Flowers again. I'm going to go back to the flower heads, and I'm going to do permanent rose, just a little bit of yellow. This brings us to something that I do say it regularly. I'll say it now again because it's worth knowing. Is that every palette that you try will have some kind of shortcoming. It'll never be exactly right. Especially if you're not going to go off and spend your money on every color that there is available. But they aren't, you're only ever coping with the difficulties of painting. You're not sort of solving problems, you're just coping with problems. And I think it's a good way to think about paints. And that will lead you off down the path of experimentation and painting with palettes that you know that you won't achieve an accurate result from, because you understand that you would never have got it in the first place. And this palette is it's a great how would you say, it's a great sort of palette for general use, and you'll get a really wide gamut of colors from this palette. But as I say, it does have its shortcomings. There's certain colors that are really hard to get. Extremely sort of vivid, bright, warm reds is one, but you can get bright, warm reds. But if you bought cadmium red, it would be even better. And obviously, then another thing is if you're using artist quality paints, you probably get better results as well. But I would say that 90% of the paintings in this country or over the world are done with student quality paints. There's a green there. There's the termination of that stalk there is light like that. That's light. Dabs there. Now, Monet was vaguer than I am, definitely vaguer. He didn't have any sort of any straight lines. They would all be broken up, everything. Just filling in some of those areas there. And then I'm going to go and do what I was looking at this particular flowers in a vase last night, and just looking at his background, an amazing, amazing brushwork. Just want to get some of these sort of unfinished sort of things out of the way first, in a kind of a reasonably lean mix. Okay. All right, so let us do some of those things that he did. So I'm going to mix up, for the background, I'm going to make that mix again, because, well, for a start, I've run out of that mix, but I'm going to make it, and it'll be different. It'll have a different sort of hue and a slightly different tone, because you can't make the same mix up twice. And this time, the paint will be fatter. And I think from this stage on, right, it's almost that you stop looking at what you're painting and you concentrate on this being the important thing. And you just go over to this just for a bit of reference. You know, all the obsessive completists would be sort of doing a study and trying to get this sort of Rembrandt-like quality to their painting, and it isn't strictly necessary. I'm switching this over to a more violet color now. He actually had some kind of eye problem, Monet. I'm not sure what the problem was, but he it kind of made him see colors differently. And aren't we lucky for that? You know, poor old devil. Right, and I'm going to do something with the foreground. So the foreground again. So that's all sort of mostly the look of that is violet. And here, I'd like to change it a little bit. I'd like to change that to more sort of earthy brown sort of hue. So I'm going to just so that it's different. So it causes a kind of a reaction with this. This supports this, and this supports this kind of way of thinking about it. You know, that's nice. So yeah, it doesn't have to be sort of overly overdone. And I'm trying not to make my strokes sort of overly precise. My tendency is towards precision, and I have to sort of stop myself from getting too precise. And in the end, I feel sure that Monet was, in the end, playing with color, how colors reacted against each other, and the feeling of the painting rather than the accuracy of the painting. Let's make that more greenish down at the other side. So there's lots of interplay of colors, almost to the extent of Seurat, you know, the pointillist painter, took this kind of thing to its to the nth degree. So it looked like sort of a reproduction of a painting that's done in lithography, modern lithography. So you can see all the dots. What are we missing here? Greens, I think. We could do some greens in there. So there's interplay now between all the colors in the background. And this is all just supporting what's going on here. And this kind of approach also applies to what Van Gogh was doing. And he was another one who sort of took it to a much greater extent, even than Monet. The boldness of the colors. So even though I'm painting green into this, but even despite that, the overall impression is a kind of a blue violet. Need to thin that in a little bit there. There's loads of these areas where it needs to be sort of filled, just loads of them. It's actually fascinating. I've had a fascinating week because this has forced me to actually sort of study things that I probably neglected too much. Okay, so it's back to the stalks again. Right, back again. So I'm very definitely painting into wet paint now. It's almost like I used to do this in illustration as well. If you're just trying to give the impression of lots of things, you know, going on at the same time, you're creating an illusion, or you're fooling the eye, really, because you stop painting what is actually there, and you just start saying to yourself, no, all I need to do is give the impression that there are things there. Okay, and I'm going to go to a sort of lighter green now. Lighter, paler, bluer. That's what we sort of think about carnations, isn't it? There's a coolness to the stalks. And you know what? I'm going to do a Van Gogh. There needs to be something here. There has to be. Now, more lighter, paler, yellower greens towards the top and here even. Didn't I forget one of the flower heads up there? Silly man. And, you know, none of these sort of strokes are being flattened. Never. Never, I say. There's some terminations here that are very light. Terminate there, terminate that there. Dark blue one there. There. And you can actually see the background through here. So I'm going to put that in there. There. Just like it's an absolute mosaic, this is. There's a kind of quite a purpley one down at the bottom. I'm going to put that in down here. It's not as red as that. I'm going to leave that in to grab some of that blue there. It's kind of a blue-grey here. Get some of that dark, that background there. Bring that in. There, bring that in. In there. Okay. What can we do now? More work on the stalks, I think. I've mixed a blue and a red here together just to get a dark. There. Now, I shouldn't really spend too much time on the stalks. They are not the most interesting part of the painting, are they, really? Catch yourself on, Kevin. What do you like? Although I have to say, I've got to get in a few sort of brights here. Here. I've got to do a bit more with those flower heads, I think. All right. More with the flower head. I'm going to mix up some of that red again. Stick a bit of yellow into it just to make it a warm red. I'm just going to give the bit of textural strokes that will just indicate the kind of direction of travel of those petals. Bring them into the... Don't flatten out the strokes. I'm going to get some shadows in there just to get the shape right. I think what begins to happen is that it just builds up into a tiny, so all the strokes become so tiny that it's mesmerizing in a way. So people stop looking for detail. The viewer stops looking for detail, and they just have to stand back and look at the overall impression. The bits that are in between the stalks support the stalks as much that they become part of this impression that you're creating. The travel of strokes are kind of indicating a spray. Imagine doing an entire cathedral now, sort of bloody month of Sundays. Okay, so we've kind of married up all the background and the actual subject itself, and not so far, not well, and there won't be no black in there whatsoever. Let's do something a bit more with the foreground as well, although it does kind of support the painting quite well. But I think it's nice to have a bit of this, the red, in the foreground as well, as a kind of it kind of brings the two parts of the painting together. Oh, there's a whole part there that I haven't even done. That's a kind of a green. It's quite a bright green as well, reasonably bright green. Put that in there. There's a mess of things going on here. I'm going to get that across. And looking at that flowers in a vase painting that Monet did, he really did sort of, he did not sort of go into details. It's sort of very, very brushy, very indistinct. Let's make it a dark. And the good thing about having no black, is that your paintings never get too dark. I mean, darkness might be what you'd want in a chiaroscuro painting, but for a bright, summery sort of vase of flowers, you wouldn't want it. You sort of, and you don't need it. So the shadows are expressed by mixing the opposing color on the color wheel to what you've mixed up. To do some kind of rim on that glass there. There's a nice blue there and there, not particularly accurately put on, but today we're channeling our inner Monets. So there's brighter. There's a bright coming down here. There's a bright there. There's kind of a greenish bright there. Can't really tell the difference between that and the other one here. Put a bit more green in there. Going on there. Background again. This interplay of color. Breaking up the lines, breaking up. Okay. And now I have to go back to the this top part again. Not much getting done up there actually. So let me just okay, and then it's back to the kind of the stalks and the flowers again. For example, there's a missing one here. A broken one. Tickle the zoom where I see them. Also, there's I think it needs a little bit more foliage around. Put a bit of oil into that so I can sort of put some more stuff down here. Kind of needs to be a bit weightier down here. That's it. The weight. It's a good way to describe it. The paintings have a weight, and even though that's kind of light and a spray up there, there should be a lot of weight down here. I suppose. Now anchoring this spray of flowers. These are just sort of kind of touches really to just to sort of just to fill it in. Everyone knows that Van Gogh, in some of his sunflower paintings, would added in extra flower heads that actually weren't there when he first started painting it. So he was at it, and he did it because it was the painting that was important, not the fidelity to what he was looking at. there's something else there that needs to be done. There, some lights. Where was it? There, yeah. Light in there, and a light here, and just fill in some of those. It's again there. Well, you know, it's like a. I've said this before, at the risk of getting boring. It's like building a house. You know, the roof goes up really quickly, and then it's suddenly everything suddenly seems to slow down to nothing and take forever to get done. Put that in there. We just want some idea that. I like that little stroke there. It's quite a lot of paint in there, and it serves to amplify this sort of explosion of flowers coming out of the. Just adding in little. I'm actually losing the definition in the flowers a bit, okay? Because I think it's better to have them indistinct. You know, than just inaccurate portrayals of what you have in front of you. As I say, we know what carnations are like. They're kind of little raggedy flowers, and they're beautiful, but they're small, and they're kind of almost little papery things. So we can sort of give that impression too. Okay, so there we have it there.
Oh, you can see all the colours in the background.
Yeah, okay, and now I want you to see the brush strokes.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It's beautiful.